Recently, the YouTuber Jason Unruhe released a video talking about the confrontation that happened between Maoists and DSA in Kansas City, which has been a very hot discussion of Marxists and other leftists lately. I personally hold a level of respect for Jason Unruhe and his channel. He's been around for years, covering many global issues that are related to socialism and anti-imperialism. I think there are times when he does good work with his content, such as his geopolitical analysis videos. However, there are a lot of times where I disagree with his takes, which can reach a level of being problematic and downright reactionary, especially the third-worldist position that he holds. This video is one of those many cases where he holds a reactionary and incorrect position. His portrayal of both the Maoists and DSA are simply dishonest, and he dismisses key information that is important to understanding the context of this entire situation. This is not only something that he does, but it's something that I've seen many other leftists do when they come to the defense of DSA. Without further ado, let's get into this video.
Well, the news in Marxist circles in the recent weeks was the disturbing incident that took place with the Democratic Socialists of America meeting inside of Kansas. Now, the organization was assaulted by a group of people who didn't particularly identify themselves, but said that they were Maoists and that they were part of an anti-revisionist squad determined to fight fake socialists inside of the United States. And thus, as a result, what they decided to do was actually attack a DSA meeting. They confiscated what they called propaganda. They attacked members. Apparently, it eventually devolved into violence. And there is some discrepancy on who actually initiated the violence, etc.
So right off the bat here in the first minute of the video, we already have a hypothesis that is contrary to fact. To Unruhe's credit, the Maoists did confiscate the DSA's propaganda, and I believe the projector that they were using at this meeting as well. However, a statement going over the attack of the Kansas City DSA was released by Incendiary News, wrote that the person who started the attack was a DSA member named Carl. Now in this article, they also noted that Carl has a history of defending sexual abusers and was also kicked out of an organization for doing so. Furthermore, the way that Carl executed his attack, he yelled at the Maoists, quote, "This is a safe space," and singled out one of the women, a part of the Maoist group, to isolate and attack. That was when the comrades all stepped in and beat the shit out of him. With that being said, it's really important to keep in mind this rhetorical context when making any comments about the Maoist disruption against the DSA meeting. I wouldn't necessarily label it as a full-blown attack, because they didn't go in there and start wrecking their space or beating people up and whatnot. But most importantly, it's very disturbing to see how within this discussion of Marxists and other leftists on the internet, they're leaving out these important details about Carl's history with defending sexual abusers as well as other disturbing actions that the DSA has done. Let's now move on with the video and see what Unruhe has to say, and hopefully he mentions that somewhere.
Here's my question. What did attacking a DSA meeting actually accomplish? I mean, what did that achieve?
So here, we can see that Unruhe doesn't necessarily understand the importance of fighting revisionism alongside fascism and capitalism. A common criticism that not only Marxists, but all leftists have made of previously existing socialist nations, such as the USSR and PRC, is that they did not do enough against the bourgeoisie, which managed to upsurge state power and restore capitalism. As anyone who is principled in their ideology would do, Marxist-Leninist-Maoists have taken these instances of learning lessons, and now see the importance of combating revisionism due to the fact that revisionism will inevitably lead to the restoration of capitalism. If anything, disrupting the DSA and not giving them a space to continue their event was a correct move to combat revisionism, and make sure that it has no place to pacify the masses and discourage any revolutionary intent. I'm certain there can be room for critique on the way that the disruption was executed, but saying that it was absolutely worthless and meaningless is not only hypocritical to criticisms made of previously existing socialist nations, but it's a very liberal attitude to take towards DSA.
To these Maoists, and it's interesting that this occurs in the same area where the Red Guards Kansas are, and Serve the People Kansas are, before they went dark for whatever reason.
Something that's also worth noting to bring up here, to my knowledge, the Red Guards in America have dissolved into a committee for the reconstitution of the Communist Party of the USA. However, Serve the People chapters in the US still do exist, which is essentially a Maoist mass work outlet. I personally have been seeing comments all the time from people calling any anti-revisionist attackers, quote, Red Guards or Gonzaloites, but to my knowledge, Red Guards have dissolved their chapters in the US. Repeating their name is absolutely irrelevant.
And it's just strange that this happens in the same area that they do. It almost seems like they're very much the same kind of people, and that's something that these so-called Red Guard organizations in the United States keep doing. The LA Red Guards, the Austin Red Guards, who went and attacked the PSL because the PSL was doing a protest against U.S. aggression against Venezuela. Which, why would you attack that? It's anti-imperialism, and that's the primary contradiction, in the very least, according to Mao.
Again, we can see here that Unruhe dismisses very crucial information to the rhetorical context behind Maoist reasons for disrupting another event in Austin, Texas. There was no confirmation to my knowledge that the attackers against PSL were part of the Red Guards, but they were confirmed to be anti-revisionist Maoists. What Unruhe misses in this context is that the main organizer of this PSL event was a Trotskyist Marcyite who was also a rapist, and he also had another case of knowingly allowing an undercover cop to be a part of the Socialist Rifle Association chapter that he was a part of in Chicago. Other than being kicked out of the Chicago SRA chapter, there was no sense of accountability or backlash that this man took. He continued organizing without any faults for his actions. You would think that any leftist would see this as someone who goes against our interests, right? Another important detail to note is that the Maoists who took part in this anti-revisionist action specifically stated that they shared the same sentiment with the case of imperialism against Venezuela, and there was no conflict of interest in that regard. The main problem they took with the PSL was the allowing of a dangerous man into their so-called organization. Once again, Unruhe paints a false picture of anti-revisionist Maoists, and it's disturbing, absolutely disturbing to see him and many other leftists dismiss these facts and sweep them under the rug. As for the case of LA, there is no confirmation that Red Guards LA attacked people under the guise of anti-revisionism. I think that Jason is referring to the group of people who attacked radical liberal anarchists who have been doxing communists using white supremacist sites and also attacked communists during a court date that they had. There is no correlation that these were, quote, Red Guards or Maoists in general. Again, Jason is missing an empirical context here. In fact, both the Red Guards of LA and Austin are not even organizations anymore. Looking at both LA and Austin's Facebook pages, LA's announced in May 2019 they're no more, and Austin's decided the same December 2018. The notion that these Maoists are Red Guard agitators is false. Jason is also aware of this fact. He has previously made videos discussing these organizations' disillusions. Other than that, I don't remember Mao ever saying that we should unite with people like these, or just let their antagonisms go unchecked. And if he did, then a quote is required to back this up.
So it doesn't make any sense. Either they're fully ideologically and morally bankrupt, or this is COINTELPRO.
Right here, we have a bit of a non sequitur where Jason Unruhe attempts to copjacket Maoists who are principled and carry out genuine work with their ideology. And it's also important to note that DSA poses absolutely no threat to the current system, nor do they plan to. DSA has never faced any amount of state repression the same way communists in the United States have. At least there's no instance that I can think of. It's also another important note that Unruhe misses throughout this whole video is that DSA has actively worked with cops in the past and present. There was another case in Austin, Texas, where the DSA chapter there turned out to be working with police union organizers, which is something that I see leftists who scream ACAB do not care about. If anything, if this was an act of COINTELPRO, DSA would be comrades with whichever cop is conducting the COINTELPRO. It's not a very far-fetched thought either, considering they've literally worked with cops before.
Now, I want to answer this action from two different perspectives. First, I want to answer it from the third-worldist perspective. And the third-worldist perspective says that this whole thing, attacking these people, was a complete waste of time. That was complete nonsense. It accomplished absolutely nothing. If anything, it only would make your organization look stupid. It's meaningless.
With these different rhetorical situations that I previously discussed in response to the earlier points, is Jason saying that attacking organizations that have rapists, abusers, snitches, bourgeoisie reformists, and overall counter-revolutionaries a complete waste of time? That's what it seems like he's saying to me. Again, I would like to stress the point that if Jason Unruhe and other leftists who are condemning the anti-revisionists' attacks with this knowledge in mind, that's deeply disturbing and overall rape apologist / crypto-fascist behavior.
From the first worldist perspective, this action was also dumb. What is the point in attacking these people? Obviously, the DSA are not socialists. I mean, that much is blatantly obvious. But what would be the point of going to their meetings, stealing their literature, and getting into a fight with them? What did that really accomplish?
I understand that Jason stresses the third-worldism very harshly, which I, as a Maoist living in the first world, who shares ancestry with Jewish and Irish people who lived in the first world, or the first world at the time, find to be incredibly undialectical. I will share a video by Premier Liles called Correcting Our Line, Why Third-Worldism is Wrong, which explains the undialectical nature of third-worldism. I essentially share the same sentiment with him, so I'll let him explain it. With that said, why is Jason Unruhe and other Marxists wasting their time on defending an organization that harbors rapists, works with cops, and whose goal is to literally organize petite bourgeoisie and labor aristocrats? I know that this has just become repetitive within this video, but Jason himself keeps repeating these points, and it glosses over all of this very important context that is worth mentioning.
If we were to go by the premise that there's a revolutionary potential in the first world, in this case the United States, then we would, and being a Maoist, you would at least understand the principle of Mao that says don't hit out in all directions. I mean, this is one of the really important principles of Mao Zedong thought. You know, there's some people who are not communists, but they're like X percentage communist or X percentage socialist, and they should be won over to our cause, etc. This would be like a kind of basic Maoism thing. And they're not following that.
Maoists recognize that individually, a democratic socialist can be struggled with to correct their path into being a proper communist. But as an entity and group, we recognize the importance of combating their social fascism, exposing how DSA and other organizations work to reinforce capitalist imperialism in the US and elsewhere, and to pave the way for revolutionary potential from the masses under the banner of Marxist-Leninist-Maoism, principally Maoism. Many Maoists, communists for that matter, are very reasonable people. They will give you the chance to self-criticize, reckon with past mistakes, It might even give you the opportunity to join their ranks, if enough work has been done. We understand that with a backward society comes a population of people with a backwards way of thinking. Nevertheless, we uphold our principles. However, that does not mean that we are apologists for reactionary behavior. For example, it would be in no way of Maoist principle and the masses' interest to let a member of the fascist group the Proud Boys to join a communist party while they are participating in anti-communist activities and holding a reactionary world outlook. It would be in no way Maoist to shake hands with a Proud Boy and say unity for the sake of unity. This would be to appropriate the works of Marx, Lenin, and Mao and fall into rightism. Essentially, this is what DSA, PSL, and many other revisionist, unprincipled organizations do. They opportunistically parade themselves as socialists, Marxists, and anti-fascists, while actively permitting cops, snitches, abusers, scabs, rapists, and US politicians within their ranks. They entirely devoid themselves from the masses and proletariat that they claim to represent, yet they shake hands with the direct reaction that strives to sustain the current system that steals the fruits of our labor, loots the third world, and actively seeks to be a part of it. Maoists know that creating dual power does not come from joining the ranks of the bourgeoisie. We serve the people wholeheartedly and understand the need for a vanguard party that engages in mass work, conducts in criticism and self-criticism, immerses ourselves in the proletarian struggle, and translates the needs of the masses to the masses, otherwise known as the mass line method. DSA, PSL, and other revisionist full cults do not conduct any mass work, nor do they strive to. They have no aspirations to win the hearts and minds of the masses by immersing themselves as a part of the masses. They go above the masses and use their activism as opportunism, and their opportunism leads to social fascism. Hence why we refer to these entities as such.
So I'm even tempted to say that this was pure COINTEL work. I mean, if it wasn't actually COINTELPRO, I mean, these guys might as well hit them up for a job because they seem perfectly suited for it. They're just wrecking. I mean, this wouldn't mean anything. Like, if you went into a white supremacist rally and smashed them up, that would make sense. But from a first worldist perspective, it would make more sense to go in there and try to win them over to your side rather than just destroy them. That's not to say that the DSA are socialists. No, they're not. But, theoretically, according to the first worldist belief, they could be won over to that position. I would disagree, but I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt from their own ideological position.
This type of cop-jacketing behavior is not only unacceptable, but it's just very immature. As it was stated earlier, DSA does not pose any threat whatsoever to the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Why would any police agency care to destroy this? As was stated earlier, DSA has worked with cops, a point that is completely thrown out of the window by Jason and many quote-unquote Marxists that staunchly come to the defense of DSA. If you look at the way that any disruption from Maoists took place against these revisionist groups, they did not simply go in there and start swinging. From what I've seen, they read off a paper listing the reasons why they're disrupting Group X and firstly give them the chance to disband. If there is resistance from the group, then they commence going on the offensive more aggressively. Jason also contradicts himself by saying that the DSA are not socialists and that they cannot be won over, which only leads us to the conclusion that they are then capitalists, not in the sense that they accumulate capital and own private property, but they are for the sustaining of capitalism and imperialism. The DSA unconditionally supports Bernie Sanders, who holds a pro-imperialist stance, with his supporting of the invasions or regime changes of countries such as Yugoslavia, Iraq, Afghanistan, most recently Venezuela. Which recently, last year in 2018, the DSA was also advocating for the overthrow of Maduro in Venezuela and the establishing of US puppet Juan Guaido. While DSA may advocate for free college, free healthcare, and slightly higher minimum wages, All of this comes at the expense of exploiting and looting the third world, and it contradicts Jason's Third-Worldist view. Simply put, these positions are chauvinist. It is the responsibility of Marxists to combat these chauvinist positions. We are not for the liberation of our home nation's proletariat while the rest of the world suffers from capitalist imperialism, and reparations for colonized people go undone. There is no harm reduction done in that sense. We have to go to the full extent, the liberation of the proletariat in both third and the first world. This is a position that Jason does not seem to grasp. Imperialism will fold in on itself, and it already has. Surely in the first world, we may have more concrete buildings and roads, but that doesn't mean that we do not feel the capitalist crisis. There is a mass amount of proletarians in the first world who work 40+ hours a week with 2 or more jobs, while work is incredibly scarce to come by. In my city alone, homelessness has risen to 16%, and what used to be the most affordable places to live have skyrocketed, all to feed some slumlord landlord's pocket. To deny the struggles that the proletariat face within the imperialist core is to deny the very Marxist understanding of the nature of capitalism. The rest of Jason's video consists of him repeating his talking points, so we will be concluding this video. Overall, I sincerely hope that Jason and other leftists seriously reconsider their position on DSA, PSL, and Workers' World Party if they are coming to their defense every time they are attacked. It's important to understand that these so-called organizations do not represent proletarian interests, but bourgeois ones. They show this by their inclusion of rapists, scabs, abusers, snitches, cops, and other bourgeois reactionary entities within their ranks. This is something that leftists of all tendencies tend to throw out the window. Many leftists forget that when you come to the defense of these revisionists, you do nothing but a service to anti-communists and fascists. We must not forget the importance of combating revisionism wherever and whenever it is possible. If we are to be principled Maoists and serve the people wholeheartedly, we must not forget the points of liberalism that Chairman Mao pointed out. To let things drift if they do not affect one personally, to say as little as possible while knowing perfectly well what is wrong, to be worldly wise and play safe and seek only to avoid blame. To hear incorrect views without rebutting them, and even to hear counter-revolutionary remarks without reporting them, but instead to take them calmly as if nothing had happened. To be aware of one's mistakes, yet make no attempt to correct them, taking a liberal attitude towards oneself. We must also keep in mind Chairman Emmanuel Gonzalo's statement in regards to the combatants of revisionism. The task is to fight revisionism and fight it relentlessly. We must keep in mind the lesson that we can't fight imperialism without combating revisionism, and our Congress has declared that we must wage a relentless and uncompromising struggle against imperialism, revisionism, and reaction worldwide. How should we carry out this struggle? In all spheres. The ideological, the economic, and the political. We must fight them in each one of these classic spheres. For if we should fail to carry out the struggle against revisionism, we wouldn't be communists. A communist has the obligation to combat revisionism untiringly and implacably. Thank you.
革命